I look like myself, same old self. What have you been eating?
At least the old part.
All right. I want to do an introduction. Just go around and do an introduction.
Hey, Leon, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you guys. All of you.
Do an introduction with today's podcast is remembering the F-14 versus the Russian Bears, the Su-27s, the ships that they buzzed, all the crazy stuff that they used to do in the wild, wild west of the 70s. And then, of course, I've got Jerry Leekster, Leekey, who is our 90s generation guy, the Tomcat Ensign. But up in the top, I've got my uncle, Bruce BigBird McCampbell. It is the first time he's ever been on the podcast. He always refuses, and he's got the best stories ever, and I wish he would do it more. And then we have Dan Dirt Eberle, and down below we've got Leon Infernal Phelps. Phelps. And yep. You are famous. You're famous for 106, which is going to be an incredible story in itself. But with that being said, I just want to go around and talk to you guys and ask your impressions about, the stuff that they show the video up in Alaska of the F-35 with the Russian Bears. Right. And I was just going to let you guys kind of talk, and I'll just ask some questions, get you going for some stories. Sound good, gents?
Okay.
All right. Who wants to go first? You know what? This is an old story from my uncle's days, and I want Bruce to talk about buzzing that Russian ship that locked him up. Talk, Bruce. There you go. Floor's yours.
I was flying with, back then when we were on cruise in the Med, they'd send you out on sectors, and you had to do a VID on all the ships that were in your sector. And so I think I was flying with Rusty Johnson. His call sign was Stinger. And Rusty and I were out there, and we found a broken back Crevac in the northern sector. And so we were approaching the ship to do a VID of it. And so we had the ECM gear on, and we start getting the low warble of a tracking radar, and so we got in to where we could see the ship, and we were about a half a mile to the side of the ship at about, maybe 1,000, 2,000 feet. And the radar goes up into launch mode, which is to use and so we start doing wooferdills across the sky, and of course the Russians were down there laughing their ass off at us and just enjoying the shit out of the show. And so we went out about 5 miles away from the ship and cleaned out the cockpit a little bit, and Rusty said, nah, I ain't gonna put up with that shit. So he turned around and plugged that subinch into zone 5, and we came back at that Crevac at the speed of heat, as fast as we could get it. I know we were doing Mach 1, and we went over that damn ship and just thumped the shit out of it. We were maybe 500 feet coming back and 500 feet off the port side, and then just stood it on its tail. I guess we leveled off at 30,000 feet because, the whole world has disappeared, when you go in a zoom climb like that. And I miss old Rusty. I wish we could have grown old together.
Yep.
Leekster, did you ever hear the story about what happened to him?
No, I don't think I know that one.
I was the safety officer in 101 when Rusty and Goose plowed in. And
they had
Rusty was known as the Space Cowboy.
You can always go out to the airplane cowboy boots. And, everybody else was wearing combat boots. He's wearing cowboy boots. And
That's cool.
he was just that kind of guy. And I just loved him to death. We went on so many cross countries. You guys remember Scott Air Force Base?
Oh yeah.
We went out to Scott Air Force Base. We went out to pick up a new airplane. So Rusty and I go out to California, and we picked up a new airplane. Damn plastic still on the ejection seats, right? So we get in this thing. You have to do an acceptance hop on it. So part of the thing was to do get up 30,000 feet, do the high profile run, and do a zoom climb, and come back. What did they call that, Leon? That test. You remember?
I do not.
But anyway, we did the zoom climb. What was really cool was out in California, the sun was just setting over the horizon, and we stood it on the tail, and after we passed about 45,000 feet, we were supposed to level off about 35,000 feet. But Rusty kept going, and the sun came back up, and it was just the coolest damn thing you ever saw. And then he went over the top, came back down. We did the thing and the acceptance, and then refueled, and coming back at night. And we had a front to pass through, so we penetrated the front at about St. Louis, I guess. And we were going into Scott Air Force Base. And it was maybe 8,000 overcast, been a bad rain, and runway at Scott was, I think, 8,000 feet long, and it was wet, soaking wet. So Rusty did an absolute perfect GCA on path, on center line, on altitude, straight on down. And so we touched down, and we hear the boom, and Rusty goes, "Oh shit!" I was, "What is it?" And he said, hold on." About that time, the other tire blew, and we were hydroplaning down the runway. And so we departed the runway and went tearing down through the grass on the side of the runway, throwing up huge chunks of dirt coming up over the airplane, and big chunks of dirt going down the engine and everything, and just tearing the shit out of the airplane, right? So I said, "You can call the skipper and let him know what's going on." So he calls the skipper and says, "Well, I got some good news and some bad news." I said, "What's the good news?" "Well, we're at Scott Air Force Base." "What's the bad news?" "Well, you're going to have to send a crew out here to fix this damn thing because we just tore the shit out of your airplane." So they set out a whole crew, a couple of new engines, and they had to basically rebuild the airplane out there. They were there for a week. But the story is there was Scott Air Force Base was the home base for the nurses command for the Air Force. And so we met a couple of the most beautiful young women over there, and got to know them well and enjoy their company. And so we promised that we would come back and visit them. And so Rusty said, "Well, we have a bunch of guys at our squadron that would like to come out and meet you guys too. And so you wouldn't have to have a list of the girls that like to go out with us." And he said, "Oh yeah, well here you go." She gave us a list of 50 girls and their phone numbers, which immediately got faxed to all the fighter squadrons in the Navy. All of a sudden, Leon, you're grinning. Did you make that trip?
No. First time I've ever heard the story.
Yeah.
I did.
So anyway, I remember Carl. You remember Carl Troll?
Yeah.
He was the one that got in trouble because he snatched the hairpiece off the general at the bar at Scott Air Force Base. Anyway, he got in an argument with him. But anyway, why did I get into this thing? Because we were
Because he ended up losing an airplane. You're going to tell us that.
Oh yeah. So anyway, we go back and get the airplane fixed, and then Leon is the next step on the scene with tearing up airplanes, and so he goes out and has a flight to take one afternoon with him and you were with Rick Marr.
Yep.
And he and Rick go out and get in the airplane. I guess you took off with the skipper, and you can go on a flight down into W-176, I guess. And
yeah, it was a maintenance test flight after an engine change, and the skipper was going to be on my wing.
Go ahead, you tell the story.
Oh, I'm enjoying listening to you. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Leon. You were in the front seat of that bird. I just put together the guy who did that painting. If you could display the paint, can you display that painting?
No. Oh, yeah.
That's it right there.
Yeah.
That is a painting, guys. But that's what happened right there. That's Leon in the front of there.
Leon, could you get the phone a little bit closer to you so we can hear you better, and
Okay.
tell us that story?
All right. Well, like I say, it was a maintenance test flight, and I took off first, and the skipper was going to join up on me, and we hadn't had the gear up but a short time when the world exploded. Extremely loud, violent shaking, and the skipper started yelling, eject, you're on fire. And the airplane was still flying somewhat, and we were right over Virginia Beach. And so I looked back and could see the runway, and told Rick, as long as this thing is flying, I'm gonna land it. And told him to select command eject, because it was all I could do with both hands and both knees to control the airplane. And told him that if we got to the point where he felt like he needed to go. And of course, I would have gone with him. But the further we went, the more excited we got about landing the airplane, and took an off-duty runway, requested the the resting gear, and engaged that. Rick and I talked about that the moment you feel this thing touch down, we're both committed to a ground egress, so you can start unstrapping as soon as you feel contact with the ground. I don't know how, and we talked about Rick blowing the canopy as soon as he felt contact. And I don't hardly remember the canopy going. I just remember the environment changing quite a bit. And then out of the corner of my eye, I felt like I saw something go over the side, and it was Rick. And I don't know how fast we were going. We probably weren't going as fast as I felt like we were, but we happened to cross the resting gear at about that point, and I felt like I had just run over Rick. It was a big thump. And so I was panicked, I guess. I couldn't get my leg restraints undone. While I was fooling with those, Rick climbed up on the ladder and grabbed me, like you'd want to throw somebody to the ground around my flight suit around the neck, and just kind of lifted me out of my seat while I still had one leg strap attached, and I was trying to beg with him and reason with him, and finally got that across and got the leg restraint loose and went over the side of the airplane with Rick, and we both took off running through the grass. And that was it.
So that photo, tell the folks what happened and what had caused so many accidents were unsolved.
Yeah, there
Yours
had
was
been
the first one.
had been several accidents, and they didn't, I think the crews had been lost in a couple of accidents. And so one thing that Rick and I decided to start doing, and this is, as soon as we started hearing about the accidents, every time we would have a flight simulator, I'd tell the enlisted guy running it that, at the end, I want you to simulate the conditions, and we'd like to run through it a time or two. So probably one of the smartest things I've ever done, because it was top of mind, and because it was a maintenance test flight, everything was recorded, and when the accident board listened to the tape, we didn't miss a beat. And I credit that to the fact that we had practiced it so many times. And that's about it.
So, I mean, what happened? Did it crap a blade, cut a hydraulic line? What did it do?
Now the left engine had a compressor blade that just exploded, and it took the right engine, it foughted the right engine, and it seized at about 82, 83% RPM. And so we could maintain flight. We couldn't have climbed, but we didn't need to climb. We wanted to descend, and was set up perfect to enter the pattern and land the airplane. So we took a real short funnel and landed. And in the accident investigation, of course, this is the first airplane that they had recovered, and so it gave them a chance to see what happened, and it looked like a hand grenade exploded in the left engine bay and took the firewall out between the engines and foughted the right engine.
Wow. So they actually investigative, the board probably wouldn't have been able to ascertain what happened to your aircraft after the crash.
No, right.
Wow.
Even with us being
The only
alive.
the only feedback they'd ever gotten was a thump, bang, and then the airplane disappeared behind them.
Right.
Wow. That is a crazy story. And that photo, or the photo that I put up, the picture, is actually a painting that BigBird had commissioned.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic painting.
It is. It really is.
I love that. So that's
Leon's got the original of that.
So Leon, that's your claim to fame.
Yeah, that's it.
No, he's got a better claim to fame than that.
What's
I
that?
do.
That guy sitting down there in the bottom is one of the best fighter pilots that ever walked the face of the earth.
Well,
And I will attest to this, that he went through Top Gun class with the world famous Dale Snodgrass, Snort.
yeah.
And he and Snort went out there and turned and burned, you know how they do it in Top Gun. But Leon says that he came back and said that Snort was in his pipper more than Leon was in Snort's pipper. So
I love it. I love it. Do you gentlemen know Heater Heatley by chance?
Heard of him, but don't know him.
I met him up there at the reunion.
Yeah, Heater is a friend of mine. He unable to. They had to go drive somewhere today, so he was unable to jump on the podcast with y'all. But he sends his regards. Heater's my hero. He's the whole reason I'm next to Brankin, Bruce. aviator because of his book, Forged in Steel, and also The Cutting Edge, and then his work with Top Gun as well. So it was kind of fun. But
Hey,
Dirk,
Leon.
what stories do you have?
You
Dirk?
probably don't remember. You probably don't remember this guy, but he was 12 years old when we came back from cruise, and I had him running around on my shoulders out there looking at the airplane. So that's what he turned out to be.
Yeah, neat.
Actually, what year was that you guys came back from the med cruise?
76?
76.
76. Okay.
Because I just remember at Oceana sitting there, and the F4s, you could see the smoke trail from the engines of the F4. And by the time the F4s got midfield, you guys had like swooped in and came in above them or something. It was the F-14s all came in, and I don't know, you guys cut them out of the pattern, it seemed like, from a kid's perspective. But yeah, I love the F-14. Dirk, I gotta ask you. I want to hear a good question, a good story from you.
Okay. What about?
Any funny story that you have? Because I know the one I'm going to ask Leekster to tell.
We won't get into how I got my call sign because there are various stories behind that. But my first fighter squadron was the Pukin Dogs, but then I went to VF-32 around 78, 79. And we were on the med cruise, and that's when Gaddafi had his line of death in the Gulf of Sidra.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And we would launch out as a section, and of course the E2 was up there, and we were told that there was a single aircraft coming in, and it wasn't a MiG-27, it was a MiG-23 Flogger. And we snuck up on it. I wish I had my logbook because I don't remember who was in my section. But I had the back seaters turn off the radar because I had a visual on him, and we came up to 6 o'clock. And it wasn't one, it was two in tight formation. And my wingman came up on the right side, I came up on the port side. And those poor guys, I thought their heads would twist on a swivel. I thought their heads would pop off. They were so surprised. Anyway, we pulled away on their beam, and they split est and went back home. I think the E2 said they came out of Benghazi. Not sure, but that was fun, and I'm trying to think of who. BigBird, you weren't in the squadron. You were gone by then, I think, but. It fails me. I can't bring it back without my logbook.
Tell about the King of Morocco.
Lost my logbook in 2020 when I had a house fire, and I lost everything, all of my memorabilia, everything except the clothes I was wearing. Wow. Anyway, we got pictures of them, and we went to see IC, and the guys loved it, and I think one of the pictures showed up in Newsweek. I'm not sure, but the other picture was when I was in the Gypsies VF-32. Grumman wanted a picture of an F-14 with 6 Phoenix on it, and being the ops officer, I said, if Skipper and XO don't want to do it, I'll do it. And so I went up there, and I think my backseater was a guy named Dirk Abear. His call sign was Gumbo. And later he turned out to be a good friend of Snort's. But we went up there and, each Phoenix weighed a ton. So we were carrying 6 tons of missiles. And the thing about carrying 6 missiles is that you couldn't come back and land with all of those missiles on board. And Dirk Gumbo said, "Are we going to go into the break?" And I said, "No, Gumbo, we're going to request a straight in to a full stop." That thing, it really I've never flown. Well, I've flown a C-130 into Diego Garcia because I was a passenger, and the guys found out that I was going to be commanding officer out there, and the yaw back and forth was every bit as much as a C-130. Yeah, but when we would carry 2, 2, and 2, 2 Sidewinders, 2 Sparrows, 2 Phoenix, even with the TF-30 engines, it was still a great airplane. That's normally what we flew with, right, Leon?
You mean the 222?
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't remember.
How about you, Leekster?
Well, when we went to Desert Storm, the combat loadout was initially 2, 3, and 2. So 2 Winders, 3 Sparrows, and 2 Phoenix. And that would give us about 4.4, 4.5, 4.8 on the ball at the ship. And I think what Dirt is saying about the 6 missiles is you could fly off of an airport, obviously, but you can't land on the ship. So, I mean, that's what separated the F-14 from the F-18 when we got into the air-to-ground mission, too, was that the legacy F-18s never had the bring-back capability that the A6 or the F-14 had. So, those guys could go over the beach with a few bombs, but they might not be able to bring them back with any gas. They would be trick or treat on the ball, basically. They get one shot. If they don't trap, they'd have to hit the tanker and then get one more shot. So it was kind of risky. And if you talk to the Hornet guys during those days, they were fudging their numbers, basically. They weren't given honest fuel states on the ball because they knew they couldn't do it, basically.
So were they given inflated numbers, or what were they doing?
No, they would have less. Yeah, they would report more gas than they had a lot of times because they didn't want to go to the tanker. And they just want to land, right? And they didn't want people to know that they were that low state. But they couldn't divert, so you either get on board or you're if the tanker was sour, you're kind of hosed. You might end up losing the airplane. So it was risky. Everybody's played that game at one time or another, and anybody who's landed with a low fuel light illuminated goes back to the ready room and says, "I'll never do that again," because it's not a fun experience to be landing with low fuel.
Hey, tell
Leekster,
me
you
about
mentioned
the night you had the electrical.
F-18. I went to a Tomcat reunion, and I can't remember what year it was, but it was in Pensacola Beach. And we were all in a room, and we had some of the old guys like me that only flew the Tomcat and not the F-18. And I think Bad Fred was up there, and he said, "You young guys who have flown both aircraft, how many of you prefer the F-18 to the Tomcat?" Not one person raised their hand.
Wow.
Not one. The Tomcat was magic. It really was.
They had that airplane, the F-18 had some cool toys that the Tomcat didn't have, and it was much easier to fly. I mean, the airplane is is when you think about flying formation at night and trying to run a radar and all that stuff, of course, you're trying to simplify that as much as possible from a design standpoint. So the ergonomics were nice, but when you looked at fuel states and, capability as far as ranges of the radar, where you were getting contacts, there's nothing that was ever built that could touch what the F-14 could do. And, that's part of the reason I think a lot of our guys have had, different cancers, because the amount of energy that radar puts out. But our contact ranges were just incredible. And for a bomber, like a Bear bomber, you're talking, just inside of 200 miles, probably you start to get that guy on radar. And a fighter size target, you could see well outside of 100 miles. And there's no other fighter that could do that at the time. Even F-15s, they're getting, 50, 60 mile contacts, and F-16s and F-18s, they're talking 40, 30 mile contacts. But we were able to paint these guys out at range, and then you could employ the missile on a bomber sized target at 100 miles. I mean, it was legit ranges that the F-14 was capable of that, modern fighters, I'm talking Cat 5, 6 fighters, are just getting those kind of ranges nowadays that we were able to do in the 70s. So it was a pretty magnificent weapon system, well ahead of its time.
What about intercepting some Russian bombers? Did you ever get a chance to do that? Tell that story.
I think we've all got to do that. I mean, I was kind of lucky. My timing was such that, I was a Cold War guy when I came in, and I was a straight air-to-air guy, just like all these guys. The difference being that these guys, their experience was they were coming into a Navy where they were flying with a bunch of Vietnam dudes. So you had a lot of combat experience out there, and you had some legendary dudes that were probably training them, or, senior officers that had been to Vietnam or flying the F-4 and all that. In our group, we had nobody that had combat experience. I mean, my CAG he was probably the only guy on the ship that had seen any combat, other than we had an A6 squadron commander that had dropped some rockeye on a boat, Libyan boat, but the CAG had a bunch of air medals and an A7 in Vietnam. But we really didn't have anybody that had been shot at or had a SAM shot at them. So we were classic kind of cold warriors, right? And what that meant was we went out and we played with the Russians during NATO exercises, and you would either on the West Coast up by Alaska or out there by Sakhalin, and in my case, the East Coast, there was a large NATO exercise they called Northern Wedding, and they called it something else the year that I did it, but it was off the northern coast of Norway, and it would be up by the Arctic Circle, and the Russians would bring their reconnaissance airplanes around, which was like a P3 kind of looking thing. I think it was called a May. And they had a C-130s that would do ECM. It was a C-130 ski. It was a Russian type, looked similar to a C-130. And then, of course, they would bring some Badgers, which were jet bombers, and some Bears. And the Tu-95s had incredible range. So we would be picking those guys up as we were crossing the Atlantic, sometimes near Iceland, and then there was usually some F-15s out of Iceland. They would get them, and then they would hand them off to us, and then when we would escort them by the carrier, and then as we would get up to the Arctic Circle, we would see these guys daily, sometimes twice a day. They would send these Tu-95s around to do flybys of the carrier battle group and take looks at us. So that photograph right there was taken from my aircraft somewhere near Iceland, I believe. And then there's another photograph I sent you. That one I think was taken up off of Norway. But as you look at that airplane, you can see this big search radar under the nose. That's a massive long-range search radar that they would use. And probably that big bubble underneath is also does some sort of search function like that. And then they could carry these gigantic cruise missiles. So they would send a guy out like that, find out where the carrier was, and then they would, employ these long-range cruise missiles. So the F-14, known as the Fleet Defender of its time, their mission was to go out there with those Phoenix and employ them at ranges that would take out those bombers before they could get close enough to send their cruise missiles at the
Whoa.
carrier. So when we would join up on them, we would usually have a flight of 2. Typically, you were in an alert status. At all times, we had an alert 5, an alert 15, an alert 30 cruise, depending on the status of the carrier or where we were. I got lucky, just pure serendipitous fortune that I happened to be sitting in the alert 5, and some guys ran out and said, "Hey, there's a bear inbound. You guys are going to get the intercept. So be ready to go." So a lot of times on an alert 5 launch, you would just fire up and go. They call it an alert 5 because you're supposed to be off the catapult in 5 minutes or less. So you would go out, turn the engines, get the INS all spooled up, have the whole weapon system ready to go, and then shut down the engines, and you'd be sitting in the cockpit getting ready to go. And so these guys, in this case, we had a lot of time. So while we were sitting there, they said, "You're going to launch in like 20 minutes or so." And while we were sitting there, these guys came out with this big poster board, white poster board that had a bunch of Russian Cyrillic writing on it. And basically our admiral from our battle group had met this guy who was in charge of the Russian air fleet up in the area where we were operating at some conference or at some meeting at some point. And so he had written a greeting in Russian, "Hey, greetings to, General so-and-so from, Admiral so-and-so." So we get launched on this alert 5 and we blast off the ship. And the cool thing about alert launches, everybody knows this in those days at least, it was a license to steal. You could come off the ship and you could stay at 50 feet in full burner and just haul the mail, put a big old bat turn on the airplane and turn in whatever vector, because they would give you a guy would run up to the airplane with a card and give you a steer, because we did everything with comm out. They didn't want to transmit on radios to help out the Russians and tell them where we were. So a guy would give you a heading that you were going to point at this out towards these where the bear was coming from. And once you got airborne, there was usually an E2 or somebody that would give you a steer or an Aegis or some other purple net, spooky, who knows what. Maybe it comes from space, comes from God. You don't know, but they tell you where to go to find this airplane. So you're in blower and you're going supersonic, or you can do whatever you want and go out there. And then the 2 airplanes would head and we would join up, intercept this bomber, and then typically we would split up. A single would join on the bomber in close formation, and the wingman would have cover, and he would be about a mile at the 6 o'clock perch on this bomber, so that he was right in the heart of the basically of a rear quarter heat-seeking missile shot. So if they pulled any shenanigans, then you could shoot them immediately. And you would join up on these guys, and there was, it really, you try to be as professional as possible. Everybody's kind of excited, and you're just trying to stay predictable. They're trying to stay predictable. I'm sure you can imagine if you're flying around in this big bomber over the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific, having a so-called enemy fighter aircraft right up on your behind is not a comfortable place for them, right? So they don't want to. So their tail gun is typically pointed up in those days, so it's not a threat. And you would join up on the rear, and that blister back there is a gigantic window. You could see most of the guy's body from like his waist up. This guy sitting in this giant window, and he had this leather helmet on and goggles, and he looked like something out of a World War II movie, and he had this big old high resolution camera with giant negatives, and then this guy would be sitting there taking pictures of your airplane for their intel folks when they got back, and our Rios would be getting their little cameras out and snapping away pictures of their airplanes to take back to our booger eaters, as we called the intel guys, right? So the interesting thing was the long range speed max conserve on a Bear bomber. Now that was the fastest turboprop airplane ever built, from what I understand. They could go about 0.8 Mach or somewhere up there in that airplane, and the propellers on it were 16 feet across,
Oh my God.
counter-rotating turboprop engines, Termansky engines, I believe. It is the loudest darn thing you ever heard in your life. So loud that when you're in formation with this, you can actually not only hear those engines, but you can feel the vibration of those propellers in the cockpit of the F-14.
Wow.
It's a very high-pitched noise, and I thought, man, those poor Russians are probably deaf by the time they're 35 years old if they're flying this airplane, because it is noisy.
And how about the radiation from that under the belly? They probably were irradiated.
That's more of a search radar. I don't know if they do a locking function on that thing, like an air-to-air type thing. I think it's more of a search, long-range search radar, and it's possible that they were getting radiated from their stuff too. When we were that age, you didn't really worry about that kind of thing. You were so happy to be flying a fighter and be out there doing that stuff that shoot, half of us, who knew if you're going to live past 30 years old? I were out there, living like we weren't going to live another 2 years the way I was living hard, man. I mean, it was a good time.
Do guys ever show you Playboys or their equivalent centerfolds?
So there was always that. So we pull up and we show him our message, and the guy takes pictures of it and gives us a thumbs up. And then he pulls out a Playboy centerfold and he's showing us all these naked girl pictures out of his window, and and we're giving him a thumbs up. And then he shows us he's got a can of Coca-Cola, which was kind of interesting to me, because I was like, where did this Russian get a can of Coca-Cola in that time period during the Cold War? I guess they had Coke over there. Who knew? But they had it.
The first 2-liter soda bottle I ever saw was from the gunner window on a Bear. We got finished the cruise and came back and went with my wife to the supermarket, and there were 2-liter drinks all over the shelf. So they had it before we did.
That's funny, and that is pretty entertaining. Yeah. So, I mean, that was the kind of fun that you had. You joined on them, but the one thing I was going to mention that I thought was interesting, and I don't know if this was part of the design function, but just coincidentally, the max conserved speed on a Bear bomber is right around the exact max conserved speed of a Tomcat. So right at about 12 units angle of attack, which would give you about 220, 210, depending on your loadout and weight, was what the Bear was doing. So we could literally stay on that guy's wing for 2 hours and not worry about our fuel. But we're doing 1 + 40 cycles, 1 hour and 40-minute cycles on the carrier. So, you pick him up a couple 300 miles from the ship, and then you would escort him all the way in. He would be in a gradual descent, and then they would fly by the side of the ship at a couple 100 feet or whatever. And this is a great story, and I had forgotten this until just now. So we escort this. We get the first intercept, right? And everybody's this is the coolest thing ever, right? So we're going by and we're taking pictures, and then as we go by the carrier, we hand off to 2 other F-14s, and they drag this guy out to 300 miles, and he heads back to Russia. Well, what no one had told us, and I was a JG, I might have even been an ensign when this happened. I think I was an ensign. That when you take pictures of these things with the carrier in the background, you make sure you have a F-14 in the frame. Well, we were taking pictures, from the side and stuff, right? And we had pictures. We hand them over to the battle group commander, and all it shows is a Bear next to a carrier, which is bad PR for us, right? You want to have the showing that this F-14 is on his wing as he's flying by. So they were kind of like, now they had to run around to all the fighter ready rooms and brief us, hey, if you're going to escort a Bear, make sure if you take pictures, make sure there's one of our guys in the picture too, right? So then they gave us, when we went to Vauxhall Follies, the battle group guys came out with a camera, and they say, there's a new camera for the F-14 squadrons. And this camera had a wooden stick on the bottom of it that stuck out, and on the end of the stick was a model of an F-14. So wherever you pointed this camera, it had an F-14 in the picture. So that was our humiliation punishment for that one.
Funny.
Oh, God.
BigBird,
Yo.
you remember when we got the attention of Henry Kissinger.
Tell the story. That's hilarious. I need to.
We were this was about 1976, 77, I think, right? Time frame. Anyway,
It was
Big
Southern
Bird-
Med Cruise in '76.
yeah. Big Bird and I launched, it was on a PMCF. And Leon, that's a post-maintenance check flight for your memory. Okay.
Right. Thank you.
And so we banged off the front end and we hit the tanker. And right after we hit the tanker, we got a call from, I think it was from CIC. Not sure whether it was the E2 or whatever, but he said, your vector is this. And so we went off, tried to do a little bit of the PMCF, but I got the full version now. Appreciate that, Taco, because I'm the best looking one of the bunch. But,
Bullshit.
Dirt, you
Anyway.
definitely have a face for radio.
anyway, so we take the vector and we get a lock on. We were about, I don't know, 120 miles out from the ship. And they said, we want you to ID it. So we came up, didn't turn off the radar because we didn't have hostile intentions. Turned out it was a C-130 with no markings on it. And so we said, hey, it's a C-130. It's not squawking, but it's not headed directly towards the ship. And they said, okay. So we veer off and we're back to doing our post-maintenance check flight. And not a minute goes by when they say, we want pictures. So we do a 360, come back on the guys. Big Bird has them locked up. And we join up on the wing and Big Bird shoots some snapshots. And we thought, okay, that's it. So we come back to the ship. I did my typical 2-wire and we get in the ready room and CIC calls us down. And they said, we want to talk to you, but then they contacted the CIC officer and he said, the captain of the ship wants to see with you, the CAG and your CO. And they asked us why we were doing that. We said, well, we were doing what CIC directed us to. And they said, well, as it happens, that unidentified or unmarked C-130 was the King of Morocco's airplane. And they fired off a flash message to the Pentagon and the State Department saying that an F-14 made 2 firing passes on the King of Morocco C-130. Well, as it turned out, we were totally innocent for once, and we were exonerated. I don't know what happened to the CIC guys, but we couldn't go anywhere that day or the next couple of days with somebody saying, there goes Dirty with the King's 130. End of story. Did I miss anything, Big Bird?
Yeah, you forgot to tell the part about when we couldn't get the markings off the side of the airplane. You remember that? what'd we do? We said, well, let's look underneath the airplane and see if we think you see. So what did you do? You plugged that sucker into afterburner and went ripping down underneath the airplane, and then you had to pull up in front of the guy. So you thumped the guy.
Well,
That's what got his attention and pissed him off, I think.
well, yeah, I can imagine if you're a C-130 pilot and you see an F-14 plan form going vertical. Yeah, that might, but they were prop cute.
Oh yeah.
End the story now, I think.
Oh God, you guys had some good times back then, didn't you?
Yeah, but we also lost some good friends.
Yep.
Yeah, you know
How
that
did
everybody in my generation and the young guys I fly with now still, they always say how they were inspired by Top Gun. And when I was a kid, the Final Countdown was my inspiration, and that what was the documentary that they made for? They used the same footage from the Final Countdown. There was one called Sea Power or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but they even used the same music from the Final Countdown on this documentary, and it had this beautiful footage of the I think it was the Nimitz and the whole CAG-8 and VF-84, and oh my goodness, it was just incredibly well filmed and just a gorgeous documentary. So that was a huge inspiration for me, and of course I was one of those guys who read every book you could find on World War II, World War I. I even read Rickenbacker's autobiography, Adolf Galland's autobiography, all these guys, and Bollington, Baba Black Sheep, and they were just my heroes, So to see that F-14 up close for the first time when I saw it at air shows, I was just floored. What a machine! I mean, you guys were lucky because you're in the first cadre of guys to get to fly that machine. I mean, you were flying the top of the line that existed at the time. So that was a real honor, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, I can tell you, Leekster, that man up there had a Cherokee 140, and he would take me flying. I would be begging him, hey, we called him Brankin, Bruce Rankin McCampbell, Brankin. Hey, take me flying. I want to go flying. And so I would get him to fly from where he kept it over there by Oceana. Hey, Brankin, you got to silence your phone. We can hear it dinging every 5 seconds.
That's you dinging me.
What's it say?
It's just tacos. Okay, go ahead. I'll silence the phone.
So he would take us flying, and we'd go fly over my neighborhood there on Little Creek. And I would take pictures from, 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet over the neighborhood. And all my buddies thought that was the coolest thing was I had aerial shots of the base, where we played Army in the Woods and whatnot. But I wanted to touch a cloud. And I can always remember, I want to touch a cloud. And Brankin's looking around like this, make sure nobody's around. He dives into this little puffy cumulus thing, opens the swing window. I've got my hand out, not knowing the rules. VFR, IFR, not supposed to fly through clouds. Here we are going through the cloud, and my hand comes back into the airplane. I'm like covered in, it's wet, and I touched a cloud. So I got to tell my friends, I've touched a cloud. How many people can claim that when they're 9 years old, 10 years old?
Yeah, baby, you're Jimi Hendrix. You're like, excuse
Mitch,
me while I kiss the sky.
Hey, Mitch, tell the story about when I brought the Bonanza up. When you were going through flight school and the door opened.
I literally could not pass the aerodynamics test, and I failed it by one question. And so then I retake it, and I fail it again. So now I have to go to a board to go talk to these guys about should they even keep me in flight school because I can't pass the damn, aerodynamics test. And it was that whole thing about the pressure building up on you, right? All I did was study. And on Friday, the Marine liaison guy goes, all right, Taco, here's the deal. You're single, right? And I said, yes, sir. And he goes, Go out, go get drunk, get laid this weekend. You don't study, don't crack a book. Monday, you take the test, you'll pass. And I'm like, aye, sir. And I call Branken up. He comes over in his Bonanza, lands in Pensacola, picks me up. We go flying, and he pops the door in flight, and he goes, now try to close it. And of course, you can't close it. And he goes, there, now you know, high pressure, low pressure over the wing. You get it? You know, it was funny. But we went to, what was the guy's name that had the bar? He wore 2 different socks all the time.
Trader.
He had all the Trader John's, yes. We went to Trader John's, and boy, did we get hammered that night. We had a great time, and ended up, the waitress took a shine to me. I had a great weekend. Went back on Monday, passed the test. And
I think
I'm going to tell this story to everybody in American Airlines so that when you're up front, you're going to tell them about how you failed the aerodynamics test, and do they really want to stay on the airplane with you?
Yeah, they probably will, but I got enough gray hair now that they want to see the old gray hair.
How many hours do you have now, Mitch?
I have no idea. I don't even keep count.
Oh gosh, dude, you got to have over 20,000 hours.
Yeah, I mean, we do you keep count, Leekster?
No, but I mean, you average about 700-800 hours a year, and you put that over a 30-year career of airline flying, and you're well over 25,000 hours, right? I mean, it's I've got to be. Yeah, I have no idea. 18,000 maybe. Yeah.
It's a couple. I remember sitting there doing a calculator once, thinking, okay, if I had this many hours times 365, 24, 365, how many days was I actually in the air?
Oh,
and
yeah.
It came out to like 2.5 years or 3 years.
Yeah, I just did that math the other day too. I was shocked by that. I was like, how many years have I been in an airplane?
Yeah,
Hey,
that we lived.
Mitch,
Yeah.
I got a story to tell on dirt.
What's that?
What was the name of that exercise that we went out to in Nevada, where we were flying against the Top Gun guys?
I don't remember BigBird.
You remember that, Leon?
Red flag.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're flying against the Top Gun guys, and we had a 1v1 against a T-38. And when you're flying a T-38, they just disappear at 3/4 of a mile. You can't see them, especially out there in the desert. Lister's smiling like he's been there and done that.
I think it was probably an F5, but it might have been a 38. If it was a 38, I've flown the 38. It doesn't turn real well, but the F5.
Yeah, it was an F5. It was an F5 because there wasn't anybody else in the airplane with him. So anyway, we get out there, and my radar is just not working that day. It's bicycle spoking. You know, I don't know if you guys ever had that problem in your thing where just you couldn't see anything on the radar. So the only thing that would work was the VSL. So
Yes.
that's the front seat. Show the back seat.
I don't have a back seat.
So anyway, so we're out there and we're getting the vectors to this intercept, and we're getting closer and closer and closer, and I don't see anything on the radar. And so I tell Dan, I said, we're just going to have to do this visually because, keep a good lookout because I don't know where he is. And says, okay. And so we're flying along. I said, you better start jinking Dirt or he's going to be on us. So Dirt starts flipping the air upside and doing belly checks. And so finally I pick him up. And I said, brake, port, he's at our deep six, pull harder. And so Dirt, on my command, he pulls, 7 G's, because I started to gray out. And so he's pulling just as hard as he can. He says, where is he? And I says, he's high on our canopy. Keep pulling. About that time, Dan calls up on the ICS and says, my fucking harness is locked. I can't move around. We went for 5 minutes in this engagement, and Dan could not turn around to see who he was fighting. And so I'm sitting here trying to talk him through the engagement. And we got back on the ground. It took 5 minutes before he finally saw the guy. And then by that time we were bingo, had to knock it off. We got down on the ground and Dirt says, whatever you say, do, Big Bird. Don't say a word to this guy. And so we were in the debrief, and the guy says, I don't know, that last engagement, I don't know what the hell you guys were doing. But that's some of the most erratic flying I've ever seen in my life. And so that was the end of the hop. But
well, that's why we call those twin tails of the F-14. Some of our Rios called them the MiG spotters. Say, where's the bogey? Right between the MiG spotters.
I've got two comments. What Big Bird just said is absolutely true. The second one is, Big Bird, you promised not to tell that story.
I promised not to release the recording. I have the audio of that recording, which I'll share with you guys individually, but not. I told him, as long as you're alive, I'll never release it. Taco's heard it.
I think I have a copy of it. You know, it
Don't you release it. Don't you release it.
$50, Dirt. You got $50.
Did you hear that, Dirt?
I heard.
All right.
I'm getting
Pay to play.
I'm getting your address too.
Okay.
Oh God. Well, you guys, you know, all those things that we were talking about, intercepting the Russians and whatnot. What do you think about the media, how they're covering it? I mean, you look at it from the fighter pilot perspective. Is this stuff that you guys live for doing, or do you think it's as dangerous as the news is saying?
You know, this thing with it makes me crazy. The hyperbole in the media, and it's always been a problem with guys like us, is that when you know what you did in the military, and you know commercial aviation, for example, like you and I do, that when you see a news story about something that you know about specifically, basically you're an expert in the subject, and then that news story is completely wrong, it kind of makes you lose confidence in all news, you know, because you're like, they've never gotten it right. And anything that I've ever seen when they talk about you know, military operations, I'm sure they've gotten it right, but it's very rare. And the same with when they talk about commercial aviation, they talk about airplanes, and I don't know where they find these aviation experts, because sometimes they have these guys on these news shows that they know absolutely nothing what they're talking about. It's mind-blowing that they come up with that. And in this case, when you talk about, you know, occasionally you see a news story where, you know, they're talking about these kind of escorts. Most of the guys that I've seen over my career were pretty professional, and at least they were safe, right? When we talked about the SSC mission earlier, the search mission, basically, as fighters, we rarely got to do that. That was more of an A6 S3 mission, but occasionally they would cut you loose and say, you know, go out there and identify this ship, or get pictures of this ship, or whatever. And, you know, it was a license to steal, right? Because you could just go up the fantail of this boat at, you know, 700 knots. Or if you didn't have the gas, you could just, you know, sneak up on them and go down the side and take pictures of them. And they would tell you, you don't want to cross their bow, because that sends that's a signal that's basically an international signal to turn, that you're not, that, you know, change your heading or whatever. So you do this specified route around a ship, taking pictures of it. We would, you know, sometimes you'd have a lot of fun because you were down low and you could go really fast. And the cool thing was, back in those days, and the same with all these guys, is there were no video cameras and no phones with videos. So you kind of get away with murder, you know, and the same goes for high speed passes. Whenever you pass somebody, you can do it once, because you shock them and you've blown by them before they don't even know what happened. But if you come back and do it twice, it's just like they said in Vietnam, you know, you never do a reattack on a target, because that's when you're going to get spanked, you know. So
one thing that I learned with flying with guys like Leon and Dirt is, this generation of pilots, they had ice in their veins. They had ice water in their vein. Leon could sit there with a burning airplane and be sitting there taking notes. You know, we go into an engagement, and we have to come back to the debrief, and these guys like Leon would be back there. Okay, we made the initial turn, and then I went vertical, and he went horizontal, and the second guy rolled this way and that way, and I'm sitting there, what the hell happened? I could have never remember anything past the first turn. And from what I understand in Top Gun, Leon, they taught you how to do that, how to plot there was like a shorthand that you would take so
Right.
that you could remember the hop. Tell us
Right.
about that.
That's pretty much it. I mean, you just learn to do that. Hey guys, I'm gonna have to jump off. I've got another conflict, so
All right. Well, hey,
enjoy being with you, and take care.
Leon,
Good
thank you so
seeing
much
you,
for joining
Leon.
us. Hoorah.
I had the dubious distinction of, among other things, of delivering 2 Tomcats to the Shah. I was
Really?
in VF-101 at the time, and I had been placed in charge of training the Iranian F-14 guy. They were all ex-F-4 drivers in the Tomcat, and that was I
Was that challenging? Is that the word you're looking for?
no, challenging is too kind. It was scary because these guys didn't know shit. They were terrible pilots. They wouldn't fly at night because it was dark. That's what they told me.
As it tends to be at
Anyway,
night.
one of the most challenging parts is when you ran these guys through the simulator. Then you would take them out. They'd be in the back seat, you in the front seat, and you'd do a demo. You'd come back and land, refuel or switch airplanes, and he would get in the front seat. And we're out over Oceana, what was it? Whiskey 72 or?
That's it.
And we lose an engine. And I'm talking to the guy, and all of a sudden he starts answering me in Farsi. Of course, I don't know Farsi, and I tried to get through to him to go through the procedures for a single engine and get ready to come back and land. And finally I got through to him, and I got him pointed back home. And I said, what's the matter with you? We're still flying. And he said, every time I did this in the simulator, I crashed.
Oh,
Oh my God.
So then I started speaking Farsi. But
that's right.
Long story short, we got it. I got him to get it back on deck. But these Iranian pilots, I can't imagine.
So that's really interesting that you brought that up, because there's not a lot of folks that have had that experience. We had I was a training command instructor for a while, and I taught pilots from all over the world. We did Spanish, Italian, Kuwaitis, Thais, French, and then the great thing about being on an aircraft carrier is that you get to fight different air forces from all over the world: Spain, England, France, Morocco, you name it, all these weird places. Tunisia, the Egyptians had a bunch of MiGs, and we got to fight them, and the Saudis and whoever. So you have this personal training experience with these Iranians, and you've flown the Persian cats. and delivered them over there. And there's a lot of, frankly, mythology out there. There's not a lot of, in my opinion, well-documented history, because they claim, that they have all these MiG kills, and they claim a lot of things. And I'm sure that they have some MiG kills because they were fighting Iraqis. It's not, there's no doubt in my mind that you could get a shoot down on an Iraqi with an F-14. It wouldn't take that much great skill. But your impression is that these pilots, even with the hours they had in the F4, were still not quite up to speed flying the Tomcat.
Yeah, Leekster. The salient point here is, at least with the Iranians and probably with several other foreign countries, is that you weren't selected as a fighter pilot based on your ability. It was based on your heritage.
Your family.
Yeah.
And politics, yes. And that's what we saw. The countries that select their pilots, like, for example, Israel, they have a very high standard, and they have a deep weeding out process. England produces some excellent aviators, and it's simply because if you're not good enough to do it, you're not going to get through their training program.
Precisely.
And I had other countries that I trained that their pilots would fail check rides or fail flights, and their country would just keep throwing money at them and just say, keep training them, and until that we were done, and then they would go home. And they had no incentive to even finish early, because they were making more money as officers, getting paid actually more money to be training out of the country. And they loved being in the U.S., getting paid more money. So they didn't even want to pass half the time, I don't think. But in your case with these Iranian guys, I find that fascinating, because probably a lot of those pilots, at least some of them, came to the States during the Revolution, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't have a handle on that, but.
So when you delivered the airplanes, was it to Bushehr, or where did you go to? Was it what's that base over there? I've done some
if
torch
you hadn't
missions.
asked me, I could have told you. Shit. Isfahan.
He's got CRS syndrome.
Hey, Breaker, while you were on, tell the story about the Iranians and the Winnebago going to New Orleans. Do you remember that story?
The autopilot story?
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know that one.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dirt.
About Dirt?
Go ahead, Dirt. Tell the story.
I only heard it. I never told it.
All right. So what I heard was the
story
guys
was that these two Iranian flight, well, they were Iranian pilots, and they were in some sort of SUV that had cruise control. It's not like in those days they didn't have the steering stuff or anything. It was just speed control. But they thought the autopilot, the speed control, was just like the autopilot in an airplane. And they drove into a wall. I can't remember where it was, but it was down right on the bay, and these guys were totally clueless, and it just drives home the point that Leekster was making. It was that they didn't select their brightest people. And I want to add further, with this rash of airplane accidents and close calls that we've had, it shows the effects of DEI on pilot training and qualification. That, when the helicopter flew into the American Airlines aircraft, everybody was wondering what the hell happened, and was it an air controller's fault, or what was it? It was the helicopter's pilot's fault and whoever else was in there with them because they weren't looking, their heads were up their ass. They flew
Yeah,
into the airplane.
there's a lot of things to that accident. I went over it with a guy that actually flew in that unit, and there's once again talking heads on the news. Well, the reason the regional American Airlines didn't hear the controller stuff was because they were on UHF. No, they were on VHF. They have a different tower freak that they talk to on the helicopter routes, and there was just a lot of dirt that, when you look through the Swiss cheese model and going through all
Yeah.
the Swiss cheese and getting the holes all lined up, that was one of those. It was going to happen one day, and it just happened to happen that day. If they had been 30 seconds delayed in their flight, any number of things would have prevented that. Had they been on altitude, had the tower not cleared the aircraft to come back and land on the other runway, instead of just going on one. There were a multitude of things that went wrong in that accident. The ultimate fault will be with the air crew on the helicopter. But wearing NVGs, what they're able to see with NVGs on, there's a whole multitude of things that just went wrong, and it was a horrible accident. What made me angry were people were saying, "Oh, this was a trans pilot in the Army, and it was this was a."
He was 70 feet too high.
Well, they're actually higher than that. They were like,
Yeah, they were, but I mean, when you look at this thing, I agree. The route was such that, look, if you're in aviation and 100 foot off altitude is what's going to get you killed, then that's a poorly designed route, and they were off the route a little bit too. So
but you know
there was
what?
a lot of things going on. It's just a really
even
bad.
you and I
Yeah.
sitting in a jet, we have to check that our altimeter is within 75 feet.
Right.
That's 75 feet, right? So that's not precise.
Right.
Even
That's true. That's on the barrel.
That's on the barrel. We got a 75-foot tolerance within a commercial airliner. So the commercial airliner could been off. You know what I mean? There's just so many things about that was wrong. It was just a horrible, horrible day, horrible accident. The accident up in Toronto was another case of an instructor pilot not flying as much, right? Because they do the schoolhouse, and so has to go out and get proficiency with the brand new FO, who is by all accounts legal on paper, but very, 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 very inexperienced. And you have a person that's a captain that's not current. So that situation was just, and if that guy sitting at the hold short hadn't videoed the crash, we wouldn't have known. Probably it would have come out later, with the descent rates and the computer simulations. But boy, there was just no flare. I mean, there's no way that you can't say it. And that captain probably shouldn't have let her land in those conditions with the winds and the
Or
runway.
chop the power at that altitude with those winds. I mean,
Oh,
high
yeah.
winds, you can't pull the power off that. You're going to come down so freaking hard.
Oh yeah, I have to sit there, and I mean, I have a hand, my palm is turned this way to guard the bottom of the yoke for takeoff, so that somebody doesn't crank back
And hit the
over
tail or
rotate,
whatever. Yeah.
get a tail strike, and then coming into land, literally have keep my hand right down here, and newbies, I'll tell them, hey, you may feel a gentle tug on the yoke. That's just me trying to keep us from lowering the approach in by 2 feet. So if you feel don't freak out.
That's the thing that caused Snort to get killed in that crash that he was in. All he had to do was just reduce the power and not do a full board takeoff. He would have been able to realize that the controls were locked, and he would have been able to pull the power back, and he would be here today telling Snort stories.
Hey, listen,
It's
gents.
sad to see him gone.
Yeah.
I got to sign off. Taco, nice meeting you. Leekster,
Nice meeting
great,
you.
great talking to you. Maybe we can do this again. Big Bird, I'm looking forward to you and Little Bird coming up again.
Okay, we'll come up and shoot some squirrels.
Hey, Dirt, I guarantee you, Leekster would love to have you on their F-14 podcast.
Yeah, we have an F-14, all things Grumman, and I'd love to have you on and just talk about the what it was like to deliver those airplanes over to Iran, and that had to be a heck of a journey, and your interaction with their pilots and training and how you guys did it. That would be really interesting if you're up for
Did
it.
you ever, Leekster? Did you ever know Hunyak?
I don't think so.
No,
Ed
he was a
Andrews.
guy in VF-84.
Taco, if you could give Leekster my contact info,
I sure
would
will.
appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
I'm more than willing to tell
Yeah, it's history.
stories that are mostly true.
That's right.
All right. Well, listen, you take care,
Okay,
Dirt.
guys.
Have a good one,
See you
sir.
later.
Hoorah.
See you, Dirk.
Well, you guys, it's just the three of us. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to play this on Tuesday night. I hope you all had a good time.
Yeah, man, it's a good one.
Did. I did. Leekster, I'd love to talk with you sometime.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We have to have drinks there. Where are you
Oh, yeah.
located?
Down Florida,
Oh, okay. Yeah. What part?
in Polk City,
I don't know where that is.
halfway
Right.
between Tampa and Lakeland. I tell you what I want to do is I want to come out
Oh.
with Mitch and fly in that helicopter and shoot some pigs. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, me too. That'd be a ball. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
let's do
everybody
that.
was at Sun and Fun this weekend, right? Did you go out for that or not?
Nah, I was working on my RV. I had too much to do, just didn't have time. But you know what you were talking about, going to pick up an airplane or deliver one into the Shaw? I had an invitation to come down there and talk to those guys. They were going to pay me $60,000 a year in 1977.
Wow.
If you can imagine that. That would be like,
Yeah.
fuck, I don't know,
$250,000.
$250,000 today.
Yeah, that's a good
I mean,
paycheck.
That was, back then, that was unheard of money.
Yeah.
And so
Why
I
didn't you
said,
do it?
no, I didn't want to do it. And then it wasn't long after that, those guys got trapped over there.
Oh,
And you remember they had to get some special ops guys to come in and take them out of country.
oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Yeah, that's awful.
You know, I didn't get a chance to even tell Dirt about the C-130 who was intercepted by the Iranian F-14 during the first Gulf War.
Right.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good story. Did I tell you that, Leekster? Long
No,
time ago? You guys got
I don't recall it.
He was
No,
a
but I'd
Marine
love
Corps
to.
C-130?
Yeah. So it's a Marine KC-130 out there doing the circuit, right? And the guy flying it was this guy named Major B, and he wasn't a particularly well liked person. As a matter of fact, they won't even say his full name; they just say Major B. And they're sitting there flying around, and the navigator keeps telling them, "Hey, sir, the winds are blowing us towards the Iranian border. You need to come left and make the wind correction." And finally, this guy turns around and says, "Hey, jackass, you see these wings? I'm a goddamn naval aviator. I know how to fly an airplane." And he goes,
Of course.
"Okay." So he reaches over and turns his radar off position, screen. It shows him, that all the sectors and everywhere. And he's out there doing his deal, and they're doing MCON taking. And all of a sudden, this F-14 pulls up on the starboard side, and the kid sitting in the back goes over the ICS, "Hey, we got an F-14 on the starboard side." And they go, "Okay." So they all get into action, and they throw the hoses out. and the hose comes out, and this F-14 goes, "Oh, okay." And he pulls up, and he's sitting there trying to jab into the basket, right? And he cannot hit the basket to save his life. And the kid had flashed him "Okay, we're ready. The hose is ready. Roger that." So he flashes him the green light, and the Iranian gives him a thumbs up, and he starts trying to stab into the basket, and he couldn't get in. And about that time, the kid's looking at the identifier of, he's got the country codes in his little book, and he's looking at flags and he's looking at stuff, and he goes, he deselects, on the F models, you could deselect all the positions except if I want to talk to the co-pilot, nobody else could hear, you could deselect. Well, he deselects everyone except for the gunny, the flight engineer. And he goes, "Hey, gunny, I need you to come back here for a minute." He goes, "What's the matter?" And he goes, "Gunny, there is something fucked up. I need you back here and check something out." And so the gunny tells Major B and the co-pilot, "Hey, I'll be back in a minute. I need to check something out back there." So he leaves and he goes into the back and he goes up to the kid and he goes, "You know what?" And the kid pulls his headset and says, "Gunny, what country is this F-14 from?" And he's looking at this brown camouflaged F-14. He's looking at his book. He's like, "Holy shit." And he unplugs the kid's ICS and he gets on ICS and he deselects everyone except for the navigator. And he goes, "Hey, Sergeant Smith, where the hell are we?" And he goes, "Why don't you ask the goddamn naval aviator? He knows where we are. He's goddamn naval aviator." And he goes, "No, turn your goddamn screen on." So he turns it on. He goes, "Holy shit, we're in Iranian airspace." And he goes, "Yeah, no shit, that's an Iranian F-14 we're giving gas to." So he goes back up and he says, "Hey, sir, you need to come left very gently. Come left. That's an Iranian F-14 plugged in on our right wing." And so they just slowly start flying. They drift. They get across the border after about 5 minutes of giving this guy gas. The dude, as soon as they cross the border, the dude unplugs, pulls the F-14 up adjacent to the cockpit, gives the guys a salute, and peels off. And after that, Bush is like, B is sitting there flying the airplane the way he should have. And listen, it was a great paper on crew CRM, crew management and stuff. But yeah, so we gave free gas to an Iranian F-14.
Unbelievable.
And they were still flying.
I wonder how many of those A models they still have flying.
Like 3, but they're parking them. They just announced
Really?
they're retiring them. Yeah, I think the Russians are giving them Su-27s or something. I don't know how they kept their F-14s flying, to be honest with you, but none of the shit worked. You could tell that the wings don't sweep right. They don't have any. I'm sure the radars and whatever else. I mean, we couldn't keep them flying, for God's sakes. How are you going to keep them flying without parts?
Hey, when I was in the squadron, you know what the biggest problem we had? Did you realize that the F-14A was made out of spare parts? They used wiring. They used wiring from World War II.
What?
I'm serious. I'm serious as a heart attack. Did you have spool modules, circuit breakers, and spool modules in your airplane?
Sure.
Ours, because they had inadequate ground, the spoilers would come up, and then you reach over to touch it, and they go back down. They'd rise up on the other side of the airplane because there was electrons just flowing everywhere, and
Nice.
It was a hell of a problem we had, especially when you're taking a cat shot and the roll control module fails on the cat shot. You've got a damn one side up, and the guy's having to do rudder and throttle to keep you from going into the water. Oh, that's a
Interesting.
mess.
Hey,
Huh.
Leekster.
But they saved a little bit of money.
All right.
Hey, Leekster, tell them about the night cat shot with the electrical failure.
Yeah,
Do what?
I
I
had
can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but I've lost your video. Go ahead.
Oh, that must be on your end. I'm seeing everybody and hearing everything fine. Are you hearing me?
We're
Okay.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're good. Go ahead.
I'm hooked up to Starlink, so that might be it. It's going off into the universe there.
Right. Well, we got these new Air Force helmets, these fancy light ones with not without the little twisty knob on there, you just pull the visor down and all that. They were super light. We were the first squadron to get them, but they didn't have any spare visors or anything. You got one visor and that was it. And so it has a little leather cover that you would put on there, and you never want to take that off because you didn't want to scratch this thing when you were doing a walk around or whatever, So I go out to the airplane at night and I jump in, and I'm a new guy. I think this was like on workups, on my first workups. And was a night cat shot, and I'm out there shitting my pants. I got a pretty good Rio. He's just came back from Top Gun. He's a lieutenant. I'm an ensign. And we run up the throttles and everything checks out good. And you know how you kneel the airplane down, right, for the cat when we get on there and all that, and we go trundling down the catapult. And right on the end, when that freaking come off the shuttle and that nose gear popped, I mean, it was violent. They might have overfilled the nitrogen on this thing or whatever, but I mean, that nose just went bam. And when it did it, my visor with that leather thing went douche. I mean, instantly snapped down, right? And, I would go down that catapult ready for an engine failure. You know how you'd go down watching the engines, and then I was always concerned I would have an electrical failure or lose my VDI. And if I lost the generator, whatever. So I'm expecting all these emergencies going down the catapult. And when I hit the end, boom, that visor came down, and all just pitch black, couldn't see a damn thing. And I go, oh, fuck. And I'm thinking I have an electrical failure. And in my mind, I'm freaking panicking because we just came off the front of the boat at night. But then I realized in my mind, I like this million thoughts going through my head. All of a sudden I realized, on the ICS, I could hear myself say, oh, fuck. So can't be an electrical failure. I mean, I couldn't see anything.
What's your
and I'm
Rio
like,
saying?
my Rio, he didn't say anything yet, and I'm like, I'm processing this in my head, and I'm going, well, if it's not an electrical failure, why can't I see anything? And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, the visor, and I reach up with both hands because I had no hands on the controls because I was afraid I would, put some input in that would crash us. And I went, both hands on his visor and lift it up, and the whole world's there. And I'm like, now I'm flying the airplane, off the. I mean, this all happens in a period of probably a half a second, but I don't think I've ever been more scared in my life. I thought we were going to have to eject,
Did you have the same routine where you'd hold your hand back there to let the stick ride back to your
yes, exactly.
hand? Okay.
That's what I would do. And I also would turn on my little survival flashlight with a red filter on it. And that would be on my survival vest, and that would be pointing at the instrument panel. So if I did have an electrical failure, I could see the peanut gyro, the standby gyro. And I mean, when I couldn't see anything, it was very confusing to me. I was like, I just had an electrical failure, but I can't see anything. Well, wait, I can hear what's going on. I mean, it was really, it scared the crap out of me. And then, of course, now I put my visor up and I can see everything. And that's when my Rio is back there going, what happened? And I'm like, nothing.
We had a cat shot. We had a cat shot one night, and you know how it is on the carrier. I mean, we used to have the saying that it's so dark it sucked the light out of a flashlight, and I mean, it was pitch black. And so we take the cat shot, and we had the module fail on the spoilers. So the spoilers are up on the left-hand side, and I think I was flying with Doyle Borchers, and Doyle went on to be the CO of one of the carriers. I can't remember which one, but anyway, there's no emergency procedure for that, okay? And so the only thing I could think to do was to reach down there and disable the spoil module. Well, you remember on the F-14, there was only about 5,000 freaking circuit breakers down there. So I just reached down there and started pulling circuit breakers. And I hear Joel say, God damn! And I had turned off everything in the front cockpit.
Oh, yeah, you can't see anything.
I tried to turn off the damn spoiler module, but I finally got it turned off. And oh my God, did he rip me a new one?
Yeah, man.
Hey up, Big Bird, don't do that to me again. I said, well, is that or going to the water? I mean, what else did we have? But I looked down with my flashlight and I could see the spoilers were stuck up, and so. But he was a phenomenal pilot. I mean, you talk about being, the type of pilot that could write notes to his grandkids, while we tumbled end over end. And, he was that capable of a pilot.
Right.
So I got lots of stories I could tell about Doyle.
That's
Well,
amazing.
You get on that Everything Grumman podcast someday and you talk some stories, man. I know you got some good ones.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on.
Well, listen,
Okay.
gents, it's been an hour and 35 minutes. I can't thank you enough for playing around today. And
Yes, sir.
before you leave, I got to ask, where the hell did you get that print? It's cool as shit. It's a guy in a spacesuit surfing.
Oh yeah. I can send you that's an actual photograph, and yeah, it's I
One
got
of
it
the
on
guys from Cocoa Beach.
on a website. I thought it was badass.
That's cool
I'm,
as hell.
I like to surf, so I live on the beach here in LA. And I was actually pulling up the surf report right now because I was just about I was thinking about going surfing right now as soon as we sign off. I went yesterday morning, but yeah.
I listened to a comic the other day, and he was talking about the damage that they had out in L.A. at the fire.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh my God, they burned 500 acres and there's $40 billion worth of damage." And he said, "Hell, I could burn half of Mississippi for half of that."
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, yesterday I was walking back from surfing. I walked by a house. A guy was standing there, and I said hi to him, and he had a bunch of surfboards, and he's like, "How was it?" And I said, "Fine." I said, "Do you, I live like a couple doors down," and he goes, "Oh, I'm renting this place. My house burned down in Palisades fire." He lost everything. He had a wife and kids and everything, but yeah, a lot of people looking for places to live that were over there, and those were families that lived in those neighborhoods, so they're all trying to find houses where they can put their kids to a decent school and stuff. It's a real mess for them, but they're all pretty darn wealthy. I mean, those are multi-million dollar properties, so
Yeah. Wow.
Too bad.
That sucked. All right, guys. Well, listen, I'm going to pull us off, and we're out of here. You guys have a good one. You want to see the
send me the BigBird and the contact information for these guys so I can get them on. We'll put something together, hopefully.
I'll send you my picture of me and the squadron, and you'll understand how I got my call sign.
All right,
So,
sounds good.
Yeah, I'm full head above everybody else in the squadron.
Right.
So
People always say that to me too. I'm almost 6'3", and they're like, "How'd you fly a fighter plane? They can't fit in that thing." I'm like, bigger guys than me out there doing it.
I was 6'5" at the time, and I think the chief said, "You're too damn big to fit in this bird." So that's a big bird after
Big
that.
bird. I love it. That's great.
All right, fellas. Listen, you guys have a great one, all right?
All right. See
All
you,
right.
Taco.
See you guys.
Thanks again.
See you guys.
See you, Torque. See you, Mitch.
Hey, guys, thanks again for joining us. That was just kind of a fun bullshit session. Certainly do appreciate you coming along with us, and stand by for another show next week. I'm actually going to talk about horse soldier whiskey. This we're going to have a little bit and partake, I think, during the conversation. So you need to, guys, come out. He was one of the original horse soldiers that was over in Afghanistan Special Forces, and it's going to be a fun talk. And then they got out and they started their own distillery. So kind of cool. You guys join us next week, and we will talk to you soon. Until then, if you have any questions, put them in the comment section. Please like, share, subscribe, and we'll have some fun. Let's see. What do I want to say goodbye with? I want to say goodbye with this one. Take care.